This video, I'll be teaching you the very basics of crochet. To begin crochet, you don't really need that many supplies. You just need yarn and a crochet hook. Crochet hooks come in many different sizes, but what I recommend using when beginning is a 5mm hook. There are different styles of hooks. You can see with these hooks, one hook has a rounded edge and one kind of has a pointier edge, but any hook will really work for first beginning to learn how to crochet. Getting to know your crochet hook is pretty simple. You have a handle of where you will hold it, and then on the end you have a hook that you will hook the yarn with and make loops. The first loop you will make is called a slip knot. This is the first step when crocheting. You'll begin by wrapping the end of the yarn around 2 fingers, and there's an end that hangs off. We call that the tail. With your other hand, reach through the yarn that you wrapped around your fingers and pull the tail up just a little bit so it makes a loop, but not all the way so that it makes a knot. The loop will start off pretty big, so then you just adjust it so that it's smaller, because you only need it big enough to put your crochet hook in it. It can take a little time and practice to get the hang of the slip knot, but you can do it. The next step in crochet is probably the hardest for new crocheters, and it is how you hold the yarn, because you have to do it where you create tension. And tension is there so that you don't have too much slack in your yarn and so that you can have consistent stitches. So how I like to hold my yarn is I take the end of the yarn and I wrap it around my pinky finger in the hand that doesn't hold the hook, like so. And I bring it across my hand and wrap it the opposite way around my pointer finger. And then I add in another wrap around with my pointer finger. So there is about 1 inch from the knot on my hook to my pointer finger. With my thumb and my middle finger, I will pinch the crochet stitch that I'm currently working on while lifting my pointer finger up in the air to create that tension. Then my hook can go in and wrap itself around the yarn, hook it, pull it through, and create some stitches. Next, we will learn about the term yarn over, which is the motion that you use in crocheting to start making some stitches. While you have the yarn being pulled taut or tight, you wrap the hook under the yarn and hook it underneath the hook. And that is called a yarn over. We'll then wedge the yarn in the hook, and the next step of making a stitch is called a pull through. So you hook it in the hook, the yarn, and you pull it through the loop that you have made, that you're pinching with your thumb and middle finger. And with that, you've made your first crochet stitch. When you yarn over and pull through, this is called the chain stitch. As you make more chain stitches, you want to readjust your thumb and middle finger and move it up to the current stitch you're working on and pull some more yarn out from the yarn ball and adjust the tension in your fingers to try to keep it the same so your stitches are even. So you just keep repeating those motions of yarn over and pull through over and over. The chain stitch is the first stitch you use to form almost every crochet project, so you want to get really good at it. Not only does it make the foundation chain for projects, but yarn over and pull through is the motion that you will use with almost every crochet stitch. So you want to make sure that you get really good at it, because this is all you're going to be doing with crocheting. You're just going to put a few adjustments in here or there to make other stitches, but you yarn over and pull through. So keep doing this over and over again until you get really good at it. You might have to make a couple hundred chain stitches before moving on to the next stitch, because this is the motion with crocheting. So once you just master these simple motions and movements, you will be able to crochet anything. You'll just have to make a couple alterations in how you're doing it, but you'll already be a master at it and it will come so easy to you. So once you figure out how to make a basic stitch, what you'll want to get in the habit of doing later is counting your stitches. You need to count your stitches, or as you add rows to your project, if they have different amounts of stitches, then they won't be even and it'll be wonky on the sides and you'll have to take it out and redo it. So the shape of the top of your chain stitch is a V. It has two sides of the yarn coming out that make a V shape. One V is one stitch. For now, you'll just want to be aware that if you tug on your working end of the yarn and your hook isn't in the loop, your work will unravel. That is part of crochet, so I'll show you how to secure that later. But just note, it does unravel. Now we will review how to make a foundation chain to begin crocheting. You start off making a slip knot. Wrap the yarn around your fingers and pull the tail up to create a loop where you still have a tail. It doesn't have to be too long, just a couple inches. And you put the hook in the loop, the adjustable loop. From there, you wrap the yarn around your pinky and your pointer, creating the tension. Pinch the yarn at the knot and yarn over and pull through. Over and over and over again, creating your chain stitch. Once you get really good at making the chain stitches and you feel like you're ready to learn a single crochet, you want to create a foundation chain of the chain stitches, and you make it to a length that you think you want it. And once you're at that length, you'll stop and then you will count your stitches to see how many you have so that you can continue to put the right amount of stitches in each row as you continue with your project. One more disclaimer, that you need to have the chain stitch mastered before moving on. But now that you've mastered it, I will show you how to make a single crochet stitch. We're going to start at the end of our chain, and what we're going to do is remember that number because we counted our stitches, and we're going to chain one more. This is called our turning chain. This is the corner of your row. So you chain one and then you turn, and we're gonna work single crochet up the side and go the opposite direction. So since that last chain we made is your turning chain, when we start our row, you skip it and you don't put the tip of your hook in that stitch. You're going to do it in the one after. So the first row after you get your foundation chain made is the hardest one to put stitches into. So when you have your chain stitch and it's a V, you put the hook in the V going through the outside edge of the V. So the side furthest away from you. You should then have two loops on your hook. One loop is the side of the V, and the other loop is the loop that you started in. So to continue with our single crochet, you have the two loops on your hook, and now you're going to yarn over and get the yarn wedged in the hook, and you're going to pull through one of those loops, the loop that is the edge of the V. And now you have two loops on your hook again. you're going to yarn over and pull through both of the loops. And that is a single crochet. After that, you're going to continue this same motion working into the very next chain stitch. So you put the tip of your hook in that outer edge of the V. You then have 2 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over and pull through 1 loop. Then you'll end with 2 loops on your hook again. Then you'll yarn over a second time and pull through 2 loops to complete your next single crochet. You'll continue working single crochets into one side of the chain stitch, the outer V, until you get to the end of your row. Then once you get to the end, you need to go through and count your stitches, count each V, and you should have the same amount of stitches in this row as you did in your initial chain row. If you've gotten this far, it should be fairly easy for you from here on out. To make our second row of single crochet, you're going to chain 1, which is your turning chain. This is the corner. And then you turn all your work around so that you can go back down the side that you just created. You're going to skip that chain that you just made since it's the corner and insert your hook in the first single crochet of the row. When you insert the tip of your hook for this next stitch, you're going to go through the entire V, so both loops on the V. Then you're going to yarn over and pull through both of those loops of the V, and you have 2 loops left on your hook. You're going to yarn over and pull through both of them. So that is the first single crochet of row 2. So to make your next stitch, you're going to locate that next V. You're going to insert your hook through both of them. So you have the V stitch and a loop on your hook. You're going to yarn over and pull through the entire V stitch where you have 2 loops left on your hook. Yarn over and pull through the 2 loops. And you'll continue inserting your hook into the V-stitch, yarning over and pulling through. Whenever you want to make a row 3 or 4 or just keep going, you'll repeat the same steps that we did for row 2. Then once you finish your row, you want to count your stitches and make sure you have the right amount of stitches in this row you just did so that you know that your edges are going to be straight. Then you just keep repeating it till you get to the desired height that you want for whatever you're working on. So some extra crochet accessories I like to have in my kit are stitch markers. I prefer this particular kind from Hobby Lobby. They're pretty inexpensive, but what you can do with these is, if you remember our crochet unravels, if you want to take a break, you can put a stitch marker in the loop after you've taken your hook out, and then if anything tugs on it, then your project won't come unraveled. And another thing you can do with the stitch markers is mark the first and last stitch of your row, and this can help take out all the repetitive counting that you have to do to get straight edges. You'll still want to count some, but what you can do is mark the last stitch of your row And then whenever you get to it in your row, you just take the stitch marker out, put in your last stitch, chain 1, turn your work, put in your next first stitch, put the stitch marker back in the stitch you just did, and keep working down your row. And this isn't going to take out your need to count the rows all together, but you can be more relaxed about it. When you're first starting to crochet, it can sometimes be a little difficult to decipher your first stitch of the row from your turning chain, and you can start to get a little confused. So it could be a good idea to mark your stitches so that you know what the turning chain is and what the first and last stitches are. You don't have to use these plastic stitch markers for that necessarily. You could use a paper clip or a bobby pin or even a safety pin. I just find that those can sometimes get tangled in the yarn. So I just prefer these plastic clips, and they're pretty durable and get the job done. So one more reminder that if you don't count or mark your stitches, you'll most likely have to take out your crochet and redo it a lot. When you become more experienced, you might not have to check this as much, but definitely when you're first starting out, count your stitches. So eventually you will complete something, even if it's small. So to end your project, you're going to need some scissors. Any scissors will work. I've even used fingernail clippers before to have in my kit. And what you'll do is you'll take your hook out of your loop. You're going to leave another tail that's a couple inches long and snip your yarn right off. And then you're gonna take your loop and pull the tail through the loop. Then you pull it tight and you're just going to make a little knot. It will keep your project intact, but it's not a completely permanent knot, because if you needed to, you could go in and easily take it out if you wanted to keep adding to your project, or say you didn't mean to do that. Then your loop is back and you'd have to add more yarn in, but you could continue crocheting. But this knot will also work just fine to secure it. This next step is the most tedious part of crocheting, and it is doing something with these leftover tails that we had. It is important to leave the tail, because if you snip it right next to the knot, it will unravel and fall apart. To hide these ends, is what we would call it, you're going to need a tapestry needle. You need a needle that has a big enough eye at the end to get your yarn through it so that you can sew it into the stitches and hide it. So you take the end of the tail and you leave another tail through the needle, and what you're going to do is just weave the yarn in and out of the stitches, so you're just burying in the tail of your yarn. There are a couple methods that I have for hiding in your ends of your project, but for now I'm just going to show you this first one because it's easiest for beginners. So you bury the end in, and then once you're done, you just pull the needle out, and you're going to get your scissors and go in and snip off that extra end. And sometimes they pop out, but it's really not that big of a deal, and it doesn't usually happen. So you'll want to repeat this process for all of the ends sticking out of your project. And now you know how to single crochet. Once you master that, I can teach you how to do half double crochet, which is my favorite and most used crochet stitch. Just remember that you'll have to practice. You're going to have to be okay being bad at it in the beginning, but just keep going. And always remember that this is supposed to be fun and you should be enjoying yourself, but you can do it.